we have some unreliable allies in our formal alliance. We should remember that before we start making accusations that the Jews or the Israelis are pulling the strings of American diplomacy and military decision-making. Well, there's been a lot of talk in connection with the ongoing Iran war about our allies. Specifically, people are suggesting that Israel has an inordinate role to play in our decision to attack the theocracy in Iran. And there's even posters going around of Israeli puppeteers and we're the puppets, which is kind of ironic when we're a country of 340 million people and Israel is tiny and 11 million. And they, of course, don't direct American foreign policy. But before I get to Israel, I'd like to talk about our other allies. Here we are in an existential fight with Iran. And remember, it's a 47-year war. They have attacked our embassies in Beirut, Kenya, Tanzania. They blew up our Marines, 241 deaths in Beirut. Khobar Towers, they killed people. They've sent assassination teams all over the world, killed a lot of Jewish people in Argentina. They tried to kill former National Security Advisor John Bolton, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump. It's not true that they only killed 600 Americans with shape charges. I think most people in the military that were acquainted with that, it's more like 1,500, and thousands were maimed. And it was not just in Iraq, it was also in Afghanistan. In other words, they sent shaped charges into the hands of Islamic militants who used them in a variety of ways, specifically IEDs, to kill Americans. That went unanswered as well. They've taken hostages. They killed 41 Americans, their surrogates, Hamas did on October 7th. Of the 1,200 Israelis that were butchered, men, women, older people, 41 were American citizens. I could go on, but we've been in a 47-year war with this country since its birth in 1979. And remember, it was birthed on one fact. It took over the American embassy and took our diplomatic personnel as hostages. That was never really replied to. And now they have bragged in the negotiations. They had an out. Just don't make a bomb. Don't keep giving $50 million a year to a month to Hezbollah, $50 million to Hamas, or $50 million to the Houthis. Just don't do that. And they wouldn't do it. So here we are in a war, and now we're blaming many people in the United States, Israel, as the instigator. But I like to talk, as I said, about our other allies. First, Spain has already announced that we could not use the NATO base near Gibraltar, a key base that governs traffic in and out of the Mediterranean. We cannot use it for operations against Iran. In other words, they're saying that we don't want any part in this war, and you, the United States, cannot use this base, which is supposed to be for NATO operations. And NATO has been on the record of criticizing Iran and saying it should denuclearize. This is kind of ironic. Spain did the same thing. If you remember, in 1986, it told Ronald Reagan, if you're going to hit Libya, you cannot fly over our territory from bases in England. I think it cost them about 2,500. France did the same thing. Can't fly over the Iberian Peninsula, 2,500-mile detour for us to do that. They've been very vocal that they will not meet their 5% armament. They have barely, I don't think they've quite met the 2% unless they did it recently. Then we turn to France. France has already said from the very beginning that this was a dangerous war, basically wanted no part in it. The most surprising, though, is the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, under Prime Minister Starmer, has said that they cannot use that key base for long-range bomber operations in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. England has always allowed us to do that, but they said we can only use it for defensive operations. What does that mean? What does it mean when you fly into Iran to stop them from shooting missiles at the Emirates or Israel? That's an offensive operation. It was incoherent. And then in addition, it decided it would keep away from, it wouldn't really weigh in. And then when it had a base in Cyprus that was hit, or was going to be hit, targeted. Then all of a sudden, the UK said, well, we'll send one destroyer, but we're not even able to send it for the weekend because we don't want to pay overtime pay. What's going on with our allies? Does Mr. Stormer remember the 1982 Falkland Wars? Remember, Falklands Argentina took it. Britain wanted to go halfway around the world. They didn't have the wherewithal to do it. We didn't really want to offend an Argentine, even though there was a dictatorship in Latin America. We were trying to create a solidarity in our backyard. The dictatorship in Argentina was reprehensible, but not as reprehensible as the Iranian dictatorship. And what did we do? Al Haig, our Secretary of State, said we should triangulate. Reagan said no. Give them 2 million gallons of gas. They're out of gas. They'll be stranded. Give them satellite reconnaissance. Give them 200 Sidewinder missiles. Give them anything they want. If they lose a carrier, you give a United States Marine carrier and give it to them. It was just a blank check to Margaret Thatcher. Do they forget that? Because they're going to remember it, because we're not going to do that again in extremis from what they have done. Germany, well, no need to talk about Germany. Chancellor Merz was in the White House. He kind of had a hangdog look. He had a hangdog look because a week or two earlier, into a huge crowd in Germany, he was trashing the United States and Trump himself. Then we get to Israel. Besides, Israel is the only democratic consensual government in the Middle East that has been a lifelong friend of the United States, that it's provided essential intelligence to us about our enemies and the people who have been killing us, such as Hamas on October 7th and Hezbollah for 40 years. We haven't replied to them effectively. We've sent some battleship shells under Reagan. We've done a few things, but they are the ones that have taken out our enemies. And by the way, it's very rare for the United States to have a capable ally. Israel is capable. I'll give you one example. If you count all of the planes that are ready to fly, jet fighters, that Britain has, Israel has more, a lot more, 100 more. If you count all the planes that France does, 200, Israel has 300. If you count the planes that Germany has, 150. Israel has 300. What I'm getting at is the so-called big powers of NATO themselves, with these huge populations of 80 million, 60 million, 55 million, they don't have the air capability that tiny Israel does. And right now, they are fighting side by side with us, and those 300 planes are being used every day to take out the ability of the Iranians to do what? Fund the people who've killed Americans in Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, make sure they do not send missiles toward Europe. Remember Barack Obama, he gave missile defense away in 2012 in Seoul in that quid pro quo with the Russian government. That missile defense was aimed at protecting Europe from a potential ballistic missile attack from where? Iran. In conclusion, we have a very strong ally in Israel. It's one of the most capable countries in the world, and we have some unreliable allies in our formal alliance. We should remember that before we start making accusations that the Jews or the Israelis are pulling the strings of American diplomacy and military decision.
Remember that the Senate lowered it to 8% and the House wanted 21, but 8 is a lot. And I don't think people understand endowments very well. 85% of these so-called huge endowments are targeted. They can't be touched. Therefore, a donor says, I want an African studies program only. And that's 10 million. And so the general fund has to rely on two things: the income from those endowments that are not already used for other things, and then annual giving. And the annual giving's off about 10 or 15%. And Donald Trump has said, you're not going to gouge us with 50% surcharges on federal grants, energy grants, HHS. So what I'm getting at is they've lost, just take Stanford University's $30 billion endowment. They've lost about $180 million annually from going down to 15% on grants. They're going to lose another 150 or 160 million, paying 8% on the endowment income. They're down about 10% on annual giving. And then the other thing is, I don't think people realize these endowments, because they're prestige items, they compete with each other, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, and they always go at the top of the market. Oh, we're worth 55 million, but that's not the liquidity price. Kind of like Tesla. When people have to liquidate and get some operating capital for the year, and that's what they're doing. They're either borrowing money against the endowment, or they are talking about it's not as high as they say it is. So they are in a panic about this big, beautiful bill. And so is Mexico. There's a 2%, it depends, remittances on the $63 billion. They're in panic about the wall. They never thought it would go all the way to the Gulf. It's going to be finished. So there's things in there that everybody, item by item, had always wanted, but they thought it would be impossible. And what Trump did is he just put it all in there. And a lot of us don't like the idea that it's not deficit reduction. But I'm willing to give them an honest grace period, because every time a Republican has said he's going to supply cider, we're going to get more revenue, that worked, but they couldn't control spending. So even Reagan had bigger deficits. George W. Bush had bigger deficits. This time around, he says there's alternate sources of revenue that we have not talked about, and one of them is tariffs. We'll get $300 billion right there. If he can reduce the interest on the national debt, what we're paying for T-bills and federal bonds, we're paying $3 billion a day. He wants to go down, get the Fed to get down a point or two eventually, and you'd pay $2 billion. That would save another $300 billion a year. He's got other things in there like the taxes I said on remittances. He's got things in there about selling. I'm not sure I agree with it, but selling citizenship fast track to millionaire. So there's all of these speculative ideas for greater revenue. Let's see what happens if they will reduce the $3 trillion over 10 years of the deficit. Because I think whether it was the Abrams Accord or moving the embassy to Jerusalem or taxing and down, people said you can't do that.
Right.
You have no idea what those people are like.
Right.
You want to get the New York Times, NPR in your back all day. He said, I don't care.
Right.
I don't. And the thing about it is, I think you could say that he's almost destroyed the sanity of the left. And he did it in three different ways very quickly. They have no power. This is the first time in my lifetime they're on 20%, 30% of the issues. They don't control the House. They don't control the Congress. They don't control the Senate. They don't control the White House. They don't control the Supreme Court. All they had were the lower district, 400 or so liberal judges, and they're going to be nullified by the Supreme Court. So they have no political power, and they're frustrated. Now they do smutty videos. They do these crazy filibusters. They pose with baseball bats. They get the shock troops to try to assassinate people, bomb Teslas, but they have no power. And then the second thing they're mad about very quickly is he's not addressing symptoms like he did in the first terms. He said, what caused the border? What caused the green madness? What caused the trans thing? I don't want to just address those issues. I want to go to the people and the ideas that created them. And I know where they came from. They came from the university. They came through K through 12. They came through the foundations. They came through PBS, NPR, the media. So he's going after the root causes, and that is setting the left. And then finally, it's working. I mean, my gosh, you can see it. You can see that everybody is coming to their senses and saying, men should not be competing in girls' sports. Oh my God, we had 12,000 people some days coming across the border. Wow, Afghanistan was a disaster. So everything he's doing is working, and everybody who said it wouldn't work, left and right. I mean, he had a 25-minute war, and he took out 10 years of nuclear development, and we were told that he was either a warmonger by the left or by the hard right, that he was going to cause World War III and 30,000 deaths. It didn't happen. In the first term, he says, I'm going to bomb the SH out of ISIS. He did. The Wagner group attacked us in Syria. He obliterated them. He got rid of Soleimani. He got rid of Baghdadi. And the result was that for the first time in two prior administrations and one subsequent, Vladimir Putin did not go into Georgia, Ossetia, Donbass, Crimea, or attack Kiev like he did later under Biden and earlier under Obama and George Bush. So he had reestablished the Houthis were not a problem at the end of the first term, because people thought, as you said, he was unpredictable. He was sort of no better friend, no worse enemy, don't tread on me, Jackson. And that's what he always said he was. But there was a difference about him and prior Republican interventionists. Before he did anything, as a businessman, he said this in a cost-to-benefit analysis. What's the downside to American interests? What's the upside? Not world peace, NATO, EU, our interest. And he came to the conclusion on certain occasions, it's in our interest to set back the nuclear facilities if we can avoid a forever war. And that's what he did. No sooner had he done that, any other Republican president When they did that ceremonial performance art attack on our El Udeid base in Qatar, everybody would have said, oh my God, we've got to hit them. And he just said they have to get out of their system. Nobody was killed. Nobody would have ever done that. Nobody would have said, we want to make Iran great again. That really confused the theocracy.